And some of those attitudes that I'm thinking about are compassion, empathy, a sense of common humanity, and a willingness to make a difference. Those are attitudes. The skills, and iEARN focuses very strongly on skills, but specifically on 21st century skills, skills that we need to have a career, to be successful in the 21st century. And you can look them up on the iEARN website, but a few of them are creativity, innovation, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, and the effective use of technology. And of course, knowledge. When we're working on a project, whether it's dealing with water pollution or whether it's dealing with a teddy bear project and learning about each other's cultures, we're learning information and facts. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Remember, the purpose of my talking to you today is to have us think about what's at the heart of iEARN that we're all involved in. And I would like to probe a little bit deeper into these attitudes that I think make iEARN very unique. Next slide, please. Well, what does attitude mean? Attitude really is what you think and what you feel. If you look in the dictionary, that is what it's going to say. An attitude is something that you think or something that you feel. And I would add number 3, it's also something you're willing to do. Because think about it, you could have all the knowledge, you could have all the skills, and you could feel good, you may want to do something, but if you're not willing to actually do it, then what good is all of the education? So the attitude of willing to make a difference is to be very central to our work. Next slide. This is something I find very interesting in life, is that what you think affects what you feel. And if we understand that as teachers and students, then we can be more mindful of what we're thinking. For example, I remember back in 1989 when we had students who came from the Soviet Union to the United States, and they thought that every American carried a gun. Well, you can imagine how they felt. They felt frightened, they felt concerned, they felt very critical of our culture. And when they realized and learned that that was not the case, they changed the way they felt. So what we think affects what we feel. So in iEARN, to be conscious of that and have our students begin to understand what they're thinking will affect their feelings. But there's one feeling that stands out above all at the heart of iEARN, and the next slide will speak to that. It's the feeling of compassion. And this is what also sets iEARN apart from other educational organizations. Well, what is the definition of compassion? Let's make sure we are all talking the same language here. The dictionary says that compassion is a sympathetic consciousness of another person's distress or discomfort or suffering, together with a desire to alleviate it. Well, if that's too many words for you, let's go to the next slide. Another way to explain compassion is being able to walk in the other person's shoes, actually experience what they're experiencing, and then want to do something about it. Well, you know, as a teacher, how do you actually teach compassion? Well, I'd like to share some things that worked for me when I was teaching. Next slide. We have to teach ourselves, as well as our kids, how to listen, but not only listening with our ears, but with the ears of our hearts. Because if we listen just with our ears, we only hear certain information. But when we listen with the ears of our hearts, we can understand the whole person. Next slide. An interesting analogy that I use with my students was that of an iceberg. That in an iceberg, 90% of the iceberg is underneath the water. Only 10% is above the water. And that is very similar, in my experience, to the way we interface with other people. What we say with our words is sometimes only 10% of what we're really feeling and what our experience of our culture is, of our life is. And so we need to learn how to listen. I'm not going to go into how to teach that, but but if you want to email me, I'll be happy to give you some direction on how to teach that. I taught that for many years to kids. It was very, very powerful. But let's go to the next slide. When you start to learn to listen, in order to have compassion, which is at the heart of iEARN, it's risky. And you might say, why is it risky? It's risky almost like a boat approaching, like the Titanic, approaching an iceberg. It doesn't see what's underneath. It could hit the ice underneath. Well, when you start listening to somebody else, really listening without judging them, you might not like what they have to say. You may not agree with them. And so the key in iEARN is in learning how to listen and to have compassion is to learn to listen with the ears of your heart and not to judge it. And then you have the potential for being able to have compromise and understand each other. Next slide, please. But of course, the big thing is, as I said before, I've got to be willing to act. I've got to be willing to make a difference, because just understanding doesn't mean anything. Learning the skills and knowledge doesn't mean anything if I'm going to make the world a better place. So we need to be willing to act. But a lot of people don't want to be willing to act, and what they say is, next slide, please. They say, hey, can I really make a difference? Can one person really make a difference? And my response to them is, the next slide, is, hey, isn't it better to light one candle than to curse the darkness? Just one candle. If we help one person's life to be better, isn't that better than just complaining that we can't do anything? Now, in today's world, the whole game has changed. This is completely different from 25 years ago, or when we started iEARN, really 23 years ago. Next slide, please. The rise of the internet and social networking has totally changed the game. And it's something that has changed our game, as you know, in iEARN. Here's an example. In December of 2004, Facebook had 1 million members. But as of June of this year, 2011, it had 687 million members. That's absolutely mind-boggling. So, next slide. Today, the opportunity is not to only light one candle, it's to light millions of candles by using social networks, internet, creative videos, and so forth. Let's go to the next slide. Again, I don't know if I said it earlier, I'm willing, at the end I'll give you my email, and you don't have to take notes. If you would like a copy of my PowerPoint, you just send me an email and I'll send this all to you so you can have all this information. Now, my son sent me this remarkable video that I'd like to ask Quantank to play on YouTube. Take a look at it because it captures some of the spirit of iEARN. We'll only play a few minutes of it. It's about 6 minutes. We'll play about 3 minutes. Quantank, could you please do that? So why do I show you that? Why do I show you that video? Because you know how many people have clicked on to watch that video? 37,452,000 people have viewed that video. 37 million. Remarkable. And so that seems to me to challenge us at iEARN to think about, hey, how can we who want to make a difference in the world reach millions of people, not just tens, not hundreds, but today, if you're creative and clever like the young people who put that video together, you can reach millions and millions of people. So I ask you to think about it. Be excited about that. Be creative. Ask your kids to be creative about it. Next slide, please. So, I've been talking for quite a while. So what is at the heart of iEARN? What is it really all about to me? Next slide. The language that I've come up with that I'd like to share with you is that the heart of iEARN is really a compact or an agreement between, for the 21st century learning. Next slide, please. Well, what do I mean by compact? A compact means, in the dictionary, it doesn't mean this, but I'm suggesting we fuse the words compassion and action into the word compact. And so that's one meaning of the word compact. The meaning in the dictionary is a signed, written agreement between two or more parties, usually nations, to perform some action. Well, isn't that what we do on iEARN? We sign a contract, we sign an agreement to be part of iEARN to make a difference in the world. So it is a compact. So it's a compact really about compassion and action. Next slide. But iEARN is also about serving. And I had some fun with the language, and you might want to use this in your presentations. If you look at the acronym, it spells the word peace. iEARN is about serving people and the environment as a result of collaborative education. Next slide, please. So, therefore, next slide. iEARN is a compact for 21st century learning about peace. To me, that is the heart of what this whole matter is about. But then I always ask my question as an educator, well, why? Next slide, please. And the answer to me is, next slide, because that is what makes a meaningful difference in the health and welfare of people on the planet. That is what the purpose of iEARN and its constitution is. So this compact, this blending of compassionate action for 21st century learning for peace is at the essence of the heart of iEARN. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Well, again, I would ask the question, so what? So Peter, it's a very nice presentation. It's very intellectual, or nice slides, nice visuals, but so what? What difference does it make? So what? And my answer to you is this. The next slide, please. And the reason that I do this, and the so what of that is, will be told in this picture of my new little granddaughter, whose name is Kaya. She's only 3 months old, and that's me and my wife. And the reason I put that slide to share with you is because when Kaya grows up, if I'm still alive, and she says to me, Grandpa, you knew what the problems were in 2011, and what did you do to make a difference? I do not want to be stuck with an answer for her. I want to be able to say, you know, I worked with iEARN, I tried to make the difference I could in the quality of life of this planet. So, let me go on. That's the end of my first part of my presentation. On the end, the real end is I'm going to give you some other things to think about. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. Here's some quotes. Again, you can send me, if you want this, just send me an email. Here's a quote from Mother Teresa. Love is made real through service. Again, we can love people, we can love the environment, we may want to make a difference, but if we don't take action to service and to do service for it, it's not going to happen. Next slide, please. This is a quote from the Talmud, the Jewish text of wisdom. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. God knows there's plenty of it. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. Next slide, please. And here's a quote from an unknown Chinese poet from 500 BC. By sowing a seed once, you will harvest once. By planting a tree, you will harvest tenfold. But by educating the people, you will harvest 100-fold. And I added the word 1 million because of the power of the internet technology today. My last quote is from the Buddha. Next slide, please. And the Buddha said, I do not believe in a fate that falls upon men however they act, but I do believe in a fate that falls upon them unless they act. I hope that inspires you as it does me. So with all of this talk that I've been sharing with you today, has the feeling of it being green, which I know is the theme of our conference, in the next slide, then I vote for green. Next slide. Here's my email. Please contact me if you have any questions or if you'd like a copy of this PowerPoint. I really do feel honored to have been with you today. All my friends in iEARN, thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
One other thing. I have to introduce a friend of mine to you. Here's my friend Shanti, my little dog. The word Shanti means peace in Sanskrit. Say hi, Shanti.
Hello, Shanti, from the audience. There's much applause. Peter, I'm not sure whether we have time for just one question, maybe. Would you be prepared to have an answer to just one question?
Okay.
Is there anybody, have we got a question? Someone in the audience who is wanting to ask a question behind you, just right there. And I may need to repeat the question if Peter can't hear it.
Okay. Hello, Peter. I'm Sahar from Egypt. I'm delightful to meet you. My question is, when you found that iEARN, it was the only network that dealing with people in the schools. I'm wondering now, how can iEARN manage to survive during these couple of last years, facing Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and we all know that these social networks have a lot to do with pupils in the schools and also the adults, and have more tools actually, more than iEARN. So thank you.
I'm not sure that Peter heard that. Did you hear the question, Peter?
No, I did not, Gary.
Okay.
Could you repeat it slowly, please?
I'll repeat. My understanding is the question was, when you created iEARN, there wasn't Facebook, Twitter, etc. How can iEARN in this era compete with these new social media? How can iEARN compete with Twitter, Facebook, and all of the other social media networks?
Okay, that's a wonderful question. Thank you very much for asking it. My response is that iEARN is about collaboration and not competition. And I think the challenge is to discover how to use these great social networks like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube to accomplish our own goals. We don't have to start our own network to compete with them. Let's use what's already out there. Now, the question then becomes, how do you do that? What do you do? Well, that is why I showed that YouTube video. That's one example of what you could do. But as a former teacher, I have found that the most creative ideas come from my students. And I would challenge my students to say, hey, what are some ideas you have of how to use the social networks to accomplish your project goals for iEARN?
Thank you, Peter. We don't have time for more questions. So, in winding up your presentation, I'd like to say thank you for providing a context for the workshops, the presentations, and the keynote speakers that come after you. I didn't realise that you picked up the conference theme. And I don't mean green tech, etc. I mean the conference theme of dancing. It seems that we have dancing appearing regularly in the conference program. So thank you for the YouTube clip, and thank you for your presentation on behalf of the audience here. And I've been given another job. And I don't have to talk loudly for this one because it's just, I can dance. Doris. Okay, right, stop. When I was on this stage for the winter camp, at once I was doing a presentation and I needed the students to get a bit animated. And it was a Taiwan student audience, and they were very, oh yes, listen to this man. And so I got them to all stand up and do the Aussie cricket chant, which goes, Aussie, 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 oi, oi, oi. So, in your seats, your country, ready, set, go, Aussie, 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 oi, oi, oi. Is that satisfactory, Doris? Doris just needs to make a couple of announcements. I would make one just brief announcement. I was here with setting up beforehand with Peter's talk, and then we had the technical difficulties. But it was a bit of a worry that at the time Peter was about to start, there was like a very small number here. So I'm just encouraging people, particularly presentations that involve this sort of thing, technology and connecting with people, good to have people come up. I was going to say on time, that sounds school teachery, but you know what I mean. I'm passing over to Doris.